And we are live.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It is the one and only V, the Guerrilla Economist, and we have with us the man of the hour who needs no introduction whatsoever. It is Harley Schlanger, folks. And if you don't know Harley, you better go look him up. You can find him over at LaRouchePack.com as well as the SchillerInstitute.org, where he gives daily briefings on the global geopolitical chessboard that is arrayed before all of us. If you want to see through the fog, you want to know what's going on, check out the work that Harley is putting out. And with that being said, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, V. How are you?
Well, Harley, it seems like we have the beer flu. I can't call it what the real word is because YouTube will absolutely squelch this video, and you already are a very toxic name to begin with. YouTube algorithms are not too fond of Harley Schlanger for sure. So, so
Well, that is a badge of honor.
it is a badge of honor. Absolutely is, Harley. Absolutely is. So we have the beer flu running rampant. World markets are in turmoil. Where do you want to begin? You have all these national protests that were going on. Now all of a sudden that's all out of the headlines. Harley, this is a ball of yarn, my friend. Let's unravel this.
Well, I think you have to start with the fact that you have political chaos around the world because there's financial chaos.
Yep.
And, the fact that the stock market, the Dow Jones fell 1,000 points yesterday. I think we're going to be in a period of volatility because the fundamentals are not sound anywhere. I
Correct.
just read a report that showed that delinquencies on credit cards are from the smaller banks are now up to 7.5%, which is the
Yeah.
highest in a long time, I think since 2009. There are a lot of these kinds of symptoms, but I think you have to look at two things to see the real problem that we face. One is the spread of the coronavirus, and the other is the locust swarms that are
Jeez.
moving
Yeah.
across East Africa. They're across the Persian Gulf. They're devouring crops in areas that are already food insecure. And you look at this and you say, well, is this the end times? Some people might look at it that way. But I think you have to go back to something that was totally predictable. If you tear down health infrastructure, if you try to chisel your way to save some money on public health care, if you have fewer doctors being turned out because the medical is being turned into something that's a guarantee of a heart attack before you hit 50,
Yeah.
if you have nutritional levels drop, if you have poverty grow because of the inequality of wealth, and I'm not just talking about places like India or Africa, I'm talking about the United States, you have the preconditions for crisis. If you do things like wreck our agricultural system in the United States, so we're increasingly dependent on supply lines that stretch to Africa and South America, what happens when something like the coronavirus leads to quarantine so goods are not transported? And it's not just food, it's medicine, it's other kinds of necessities. So this should be taken as a warning that hopefully instead of panicking, we can apply competent medical procedures and if necessary, quarantine in certain places to ensure that this doesn't spread to a full-scale pandemic. But we should take this as a warning sign. We're doing something wrong with our economic policies. And I think that's as good a place as any to start because when you look at the presidential election in the United States, you get a sense of a group of Democrats who are headless. When you talk about when Macron said NATO is brain dead, it's beginning to look as though the Democratic Party is brain dead. And the possibility that you could end up with Mayor Mussolini Mike Bloomberg as the Democratic nominee. While he was torn apart in his first debate appearance, he's still spending. I mean, I just read this. He's given more than 500 people $2,500 a month to send out daily volumes of texts to friends and to post on social media. This dwarfs what Putin is alleged to have done in 2016. So, I think we're headed toward a real political, social, and moral crisis.
Mm-hmm. No, it really is. And I think on a broader reach, when you see the ramifications of all these things culminating, it's the vaunted planners in their ivory towers that are literally crumbling because right now it's their systems, their world order that they talked about and designed for so long, Harley, is literally coming apart right in front of their faces, and they are panicking.
Well, one example, though, of something that is not a an unintended consequence is that most of these people we're talking about, these globalist financiers, most of them support a radical green agenda, which includes depopulation. And
Right.
so when you see someone like Bloomberg telling you for your health, you shouldn't drink sugary drinks and you shouldn't smoke and things like that, at the same time, he's saying we shouldn't spend money to keep people alive once they're over a certain age. Now, maybe he initially spoke, but once you establish the principle that at a certain point in life, it's not worth the resources that society has to expend to keep someone alive,
Correct.
you're turning a growing possibility that's, and that's what Bloomberg represents. And I have to say this as well. That's typical of the other Democrats. You know, when they say, "Oh, we want Medicare for all,"
Yeah.
how are you going to afford it if you're going to tear down the physical economy, which produces the wealth that's
Hey, Harley, you're breaking up. You're breaking up pretty
necessary
bad. CJ, are you able to hear
to
Harley?
provide universal?
Harley,
Yeah,
Harley,
I'm here.
you were
You got
breaking up.
me?
You were coming out.
Hello?
Yeah, you were coming out very. Hello, could you hear us, Harley?
Yes, I hear
Harley.
you now.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were
Hello?
breaking up. Could you hear us,
I hear you
Harley?
now.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were
Hello?
breaking up. If you could repeat the last 30 seconds or 20 seconds of what you said, because a lot of that was chopped up.
I wish I could remember that. I just,
No worries. No worries.
I was just talking about it's not an unintended consequence
Yeah.
that diseases are spreading and that huge sections of the population are threatened by extinction because that's the intention of these financiers.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
And that's why they're pouring money into protecting bloated financial assets that
mhm.
are indeterminable value but are mostly worthless. But they keep trading them because that's how they're making their money. And that's why there's not credit available for productive enterprises.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely correct. What do you think is do you start to feel that, and I'm starting to feel this with it, that coronavirus being that it is a real virus, but I think this is a massive um uh, for lack of a better word, almost like an overreaction. And
Well,
in some
psychological
ways,
warfare.
say again.
Psychological warfare.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely
Look,
correct. It's a massive
yeah,
psyop.
I was at a lecture last night where someone pointed out that 20,000 Germans are going to die of flu this year. Now, that's more than the total fatalities so far globally from coronavirus.
Yep.
So you have different kinds of diseases. Now, maybe this will turn into a pandemic, but my point is that rather than come up with scenarios, let me just read you something Lyndon LaRouche once said, which addresses this question. He said, the actual strategic purpose and function of competent economic forecasting is not to attempt to predict what will happen, but to cause it to happen.
Mm.
Now, what he means by that is that your forecasting should be based on an understanding of the dangers that you face, where those dangers are coming from, and how to correct them. And instead of doing that, if you just create panic,
hmm
uh, you're not addressing the problems that led to the cause in the first place.
Correct. Correct. Harley, what else is on your radar? And anything else you want to elaborate on, especially with the world situation the way it is? Would you like to touch base on what China's doing? How are they doing out there? What are your sources telling you? And and it's also remarkable to me that this is also pretty much affecting the entire northern hemisphere. It seems like, while the southern hemisphere seems to be intact for now. Anything that you want to add, Harley? Go for it.
Well, actually, what I'd like to talk about is this Russiagate 6, or
Yes,
whatever you want to call it.
sure.
The idea that Adam Schiff is now running around saying, once again, the Russians are going to try and elect Trump, and they're going to try and support Bernie Sanders and the Democratic side. I mean, look, this is so preposterous. I mean, here's the and then Bernie Sanders takes it seriously and attacks Putin as an autocratic thug, giving credibility to the whole scenario. Here's the point. Bernie is not a real revolutionary, but there is a revolutionary ferment in the United States. It's what elected Trump. It's what almost defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016, because what's the support for Bernie based on? People don't like the Obama-Hillary Clinton leadership of the Democratic Party. And they see that in the attempt to impose Biden or Buttigieg or Bloomberg on them as a candidate. So they're getting away from that by supporting Bernie. Now, if you look at Bernie's policies, he's for a Green New Deal that might be more extreme than any of the rest, except for Bloomberg. He buys into the whole Russiagate story, which means he's back in a sense in the Cold War. I think it's kind of humorous to say that Bernie Sanders is pro-communist and pro-Russian, when in fact his policies have been very much along the lines of the British imperial geopolitics. But then you look at what Trump is doing, besides poking fun at them, saying the Democrats are treating Bernie unfairly. They're doing the same thing again that they did in 2016. Remember, Russiagate emerged after as a popular rallying cry after the WikiLeaks dump of documents showing that Hillary was cheating against Bernie to get the Democratic nomination. So now we're seeing that again. Now, what's Trump doing? He's in India, and he's talking to the Indians, not about a solution for the next 6 months or 2 years, but for a couple generations. How do we increase the aid? How do we increase the common cultural interests of nations? And this is what he's trying to do also with China and Russia. And instead, you have the British imperial geopoliticians who are saying, well, we should side with India against China, side with India against Russia, side with Russia against China, with China against Russia, and on and on and on. Trump really believes this idea that sovereign nations can reach agreements that are to the benefit of both nations or multiple nations. And this is what the geopoliticians don't want. They can't tolerate. In order to keep this petrodollar system intact, you've got to destroy any potential alternative. So the Belt and Road Initiative of China is under attack. Russia is under attack. India is under attack. The idea that if Trump doesn't come with a signed and sealed agreement with Modi, it was a failure. It was just for his ego gratification. That's the line you get from the New York Times and the Washington Post, because these journals and these politicians don't want Americans to think ahead 2 or 3 generations.
Yeah.
And so that's where the quote from LaRouche is significant. Instead of scenario mongering, look at what the enemies of our country are trying to do to us, and look at what the alternatives would represent. And I think that's where Trump, on a very basic level, is far ahead of any of his opponents.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. He's doing a lot of adulting, as they would say. A lot of adulting, Harley. Well, you have the toddlers over at the DNC.
And at the National Security Council, too. Look, people may not have heard this, but Lindsey Graham announced today that the Senate Judiciary Committee is going to begin their own investigation into the abuse of the FISA court. So the question is, what did McCabe and Comey know? When did they know the Steele dossier was unreliable? Who knew what when? And this is going to make things very uncomfortable for Adam Schiff and Pelosi and those who are trying to launch a repeat of Russiagate against Trump and also against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. It's funny. Have you heard Chris Matthews? This it was yesterday, where he was likening the victory of Bernie Sanders in Nevada to the call that General Paul Renault has given Churchill when Hitler invaded France. It's just incredible. It's they made the point. It's just as if they were reacting towards Sanders in the same vein as if Trump won. I mean, literally, their establishment is tearing itself apart, Harley.
And I think it's important to distinguish between Sanders' candidacy on the one hand and the
Sure.
actual insurgency on the other. You know,
Mm,
in the Democratic Party, there's nowhere to go except to Sanders. You could go to Tulsi Gabbard, but the Hillary Clinton and the media made her unacceptable.
yeah.
So if you don't like the DNC, if you don't like the Podestas and the Hillary Clinton networks and the Obama crowd, where do you go? You go to Bernie.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean he's an actual insurgent or has a solution, because I think
Correct.
what will happen is if they steal the nomination from him this time, then a lot of those voters will go over and vote for Trump.
Yeah.
So, you know, Bloomberg and others who have this strategy to cut down Sanders at the South Carolina debate tonight and try to stop his momentum are actually creating a circumstance where they're going to lose a certain portion of the Democratic Party, including
Mm,
minority voters, Black and Hispanic voters. So the Democratic Party has screwed itself. Now, the only strategy they have left is to pull the plug on the financial system. And you blame the coronavirus. I mean, I think what they'll blame instead is they'll blame it on Trump. But I think
sure.
that's the last option they have, and the danger is if that happens, we could end up with Bernie Sanders or Michael Bloomberg in the White House, and that would be a disaster.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if they can lock down this, they're locking down the 2020 elections and whatnot. I think this is going to backfire bad. I think in the next 30 days, I think this whole Corona thing will be behind us. That's what I'm sensing, and I think this will be behind us. There's something a lot of things about this that just doesn't make sense to me, Harley. It really doesn't. But I think we'll there's some good that'll come out of it. You know?
Well, one hopes that that's true,
Yeah.
and instead of just saying, "Oh, we dodged a bullet, now let's go back to business as usual,"
No. Right.
we do have to start addressing this question of are we going to reinvigorate our domestic economy? And I'm watching very closely what the president did when he went out to California last week and restored water to the farmers in the San Joaquin Valley in the Central Valley in California, where they were being starved of water. That's where 50% of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables in the United States come from.
There you
What
go.
happens if you shut down American agriculture using this green nonsense? You make us increasingly dependent on less stable and less safe food supplies from poorer countries, where you could have a threat that those food supplies will be cut with problems of epidemics in the future. So,
Correct.
minimally, we need redundancy in medical capability, in food production, and in industrial production. And if you don't emphasize that as a policy, you're leaving us susceptible to the worst aspects of globalization, which is dependence on countries that are not dependable.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Harley, closing comments, sir. Go for it.
Well, I would recommend that people go to LaRouchePack.com Saturday and listen to Bill Binney, who's going to be
Mm,
giving a special report at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be available on LaRouchePack.com, where he's going to talk about in depth the Russia Gate and the national security state. And I think Bill is someone who is worth a listen to on this thing, especially with them trying to gear this up again. So I would urge people to do that. And if you want to be in touch with me, just send me an email at harleysch@gmail.com.
well said. Harley Schlanger, the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. And again, it is a pleasure to have you on. Folks, again, check out his work over at LaRouchePack.com and the SchillerInstitute.org. The links will be in the description box Thank you all, and have a great day. Take it away, CJ.